Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to a very special late night edition of The Cult. This isn't going to be a typical show like I usually do. I just didn't know what else to file it under. I hope that people come and they learn. But here's the thing. So earlier today, I did a rather abbreviated stream talking about the Nashville shooter manifesto. And I didn't really have as much time as I like to go into the details of why I'm analyzing it the way I do. But I do wanted to come back and explain it, because here's the thing, guys. It's like the conservative right are their own worst enemy, because the conservative right would rather latch on to their favorite talking points than to look objectively at what's going on and to see evidence presented in front of them. Now, the reason that this is important for the Nashville shooter manifesto is that the right is losing their minds right now, going, it's about white people, it's about white people, it's about white people, it's about white people, that's all it is. White people are the poor, abused victims of the world. And that's not what it's about. And anyone who has been following my content for any degree of time knew fully what it was about. I saw a chat full of it earlier. People came in my chat and they said, Carlin, we understood what this was about. This was about capitalism. This was about private property. And it was. The Nashville Shooter Manifesto is not about race. It's not about sexuality. It is about capitalism and private property. And I didn't have as much time earlier to explain that, but I'm back now, and we're going to be walking through some clips tonight from all of the thousands of hours of socialism streams that I've done, where I'm going to explain and show you explicitly what this is about. And I want to try to be patient and answer questions because I realize that not everyone has been watching my content forever. Not everyone even knows who I am or what I've been doing because I'm like this hidden thing on the internet where like the conservative influencers who all subscribe to my work, they all follow me. They are all subscribing to my Substack. I have all their email addresses. True story. They pretend they don't know who I am and then they steal my work. Or they reference it and like subtweet me. Or Ted Cruz writes a fucking book that copies my work explicitly. I'm not bitter or anything about that. So they all follow me and they all know this, but they refuse to teach their audiences about it. They refuse to teach their audiences what is going on because the conservative audience is desperate to grasp onto this idea that white people are the poor, abused victims of the world when they are not. They are not. The left does not care about skin color. The right desperately cares about skin color. And I'm going to prove that to you guys tonight because what we're going to do is I'm going to show again the Nashville Shooter Manifesto just for people who haven't seen it yet, at least the one page that I'm specifically interested in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through a presentation that I did recently called How to Speak Socialist. Now, we're not going to go through every single part of the presentation, although, I mean, we might make our way through a good bit of it. But the reason that I want to go through this presentation is because I have like 15 plus clips in this presentation of real leftists, the people driving the agenda, the people who are responsible for critical race theory in schools, the people who are responsible for gender ideology, the people who are actively trying to abolish the nuclear family. I want to show you in their own words what they say when they think that you're not listening. Because here's the deal, guys. For people that might be new to me, I have been following what's been going on the left really intensively every day of my life for 4 years. Now, you might say, well, Carlin, we know what's going on the left. We've known about this our entire lives. You just found this 4 years ago? Oh, silly, silly girl. You don't know anything. Well, the difference between me and you is that I have watched literally thousands of hours of woke training and far left training. I have a stream that I have done every single Friday on my channel for over 3 years, almost 4 years now, called Happy Hour, where we watch the trainings that the woke left does in organizations. We watch them in the college classrooms. We watch the full form of what they're doing. I have done this every single week for 3 years. Over a year ago, we started Socialism Saturday, in which we started watching the farthest left content that is available on the internet. And the reason that we started doing this is because we figured out that if we go back and we watch socialism from 3, 4, 5 years ago, those are the talking points of the Democratic Party today, because there are very specific activists on the far left that are driving all of the crazy stuff that you see. This is the origin point for critical race theory. This is the origin point for gender ideology. This is the origin point for the attacks on parental rights. This is the origin point for every single thing that the conservative right is complaining about all day, every day. So we started watching it for Socialism Saturday, but then we started watching midweek too. And now pretty much all we do on my channel, with the occasional dalliance into Nick Fuentes and the far right, occasionally we like to have a little bit of fun. But pretty much the only thing we do on my channel is watch woke training, woke speeches, woke presentations, the real things, not libs of TikTok. Not the things that are cut out of context. We watch them from start to finish. And when you watch this stuff, literally thousands of hours I have sat through, I am fairly certain I have watched more woke training than anyone else on the planet. Truly. Now, James Lindsay has read more woke literature than anyone else on the planet. I don't read their philosophy. I don't go back and I read their academic literature. I have not read Hegel. I have not read Marcuse. I've read Marx because I had to. But like, I don't do that. God bless James Lindsay for doing it, but I torture myself enough by literally sitting down and watching their trainings. The things they do at their private conferences, the things they do at colleges and universities, the things they do in the classroom. This is not the stuff you're going to see on Libs of TikTok, okay? The stuff you mostly see on Libs of TikTok is bullshit. These are not the people that are running around with crazy hair having nervous breakdowns on the internet for likes and clicks and clout. This is not what this is. These are the real leaders of the far left, the academics, the intellectuals, the authors, the people that are driving all of this stuff. This is the origin point. And I know what I'm talking about because I have watched more of it than anyone else on the internet. I have watched more of this stuff than James Lindsay has. I've watched more of this stuff than Chris Rufo has. I've watched more of this stuff than Steven Crowder has. I have watched way more of this stuff than Tim Pool has. By a significant degree. The difference between what I do and what James Lindsay does, and I think that James Lindsay is incomparable. I think everyone should be following him. I actually don't, because I don't want to be influenced by what he's saying. I want to come to my own conclusions, but I think his work is incomparable. The difference between me and him is that he focuses on the academic literature. I focus on the real world implementation. What are socialists and far leftists teaching to each other? How is this stuff showing up in schools? How is it showing up in the real world? What are their planning sessions? I've gone to their socialist events. I've gone to them. I've gone undercover at them multiple times. If you want to know what the far left is doing in the real world, I will show you. I will show you what they mean. I will show you how they're showing up. But the thing of it is you have to want to understand them, because the difference between what the far left is actually doing and what the right thinks that they're doing is mind-boggling, because pretty much no one on the conservative right does what I do. And even though they all follow me because they like to steal my content and then make it into something that it's not, even though they all follow me, they refuse to understand and articulate what is really going on. And so I will show you what's going on. You don't have to take my word for it. You can see what they say for yourself. And if you say, Carlin, you're just showing us a bunch of clips, every single clip that I am showing you tonight is from a long form video that is freely available on my channel. So you can go and watch it for yourself. If you think I cut this stuff out of context, you are welcome to go and watch the long form content. I started making clips because people asked me to. But the full content is always there. So if you want it, it's available. Fact check me, bro. I don't mind being fact checked because I know that what I'm presenting is a correct analysis and an intellectually correct way of presenting the information that is not out of context with what the greater presentation was. Jenny's getting inky with it. Do you think the leaker only leaked the pages? They did that to create a reaction? Yes, I do. The right needs to learn to quit going into reaction mode all the time. This is part of my problem with this manifesto. Why do we only have 3 pages? Why do we only have 3 pages? I want to see the rest of it. But even in the pages that we have, I do think that it's revealing, and I'm going to say why in a second. Jenny says, you and James' work complements each other. It shows up that they are doing what they've written about and trying to implement it. It is how you know what's real and and how to see what may come. That's exactly right. I focus on the real world implementation because I want people to know what's coming. I don't want to wax philosophical about a dead guy wrote 100 years ago. I want people to know what's coming right now. So, first thing I want to look at is the manifesto from today. Let me get this up. Now, we went over this earlier, But the specific page I want to look at is this one, because this is really the only page that matters. Because this is the page they're all obsessing about, saying that this is all about white people. There was only white people. White people are the poor victims of the world. No. Kill those kids, those crackers, going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddy's Mustangs and convertibles. Fuck you, little shits. I wish to shoot your weak ass dicks with your mop yellow hair. Want to kill all you little crackers. Bunch of little F word, I'm not saying that. With your white privileges. Fuck you, F word. The majority of this page is not about skin color, is not about sexual orientation. It is about the haves versus the have-nots, the people with money versus the people who don't have it, the bourgeois versus the proletariat, the capitalists versus the workers. Going to fancy private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks or their daddy's Mustangs. This is a manifesto about killing rich kids. This is about killing rich kids. That's what this is about. The rich kids that this person went to their school, probably got rejected by them, probably got rejected by some blonde guy, and that's why they have with your mop yellow hair, that's referencing a specific person. When it says white privilege, whiteness means capitalism, so white privilege means beneficiary of capitalism. Well, no, Adam, because you don't know how to speak socialist, so that's your incorrect interpretation of it. This is about rich kids. That's what it's about. Every single time the left uses the term capitalism or whiteness, or excuse me, every single time the left uses the term whiteness, white supremacy, racism, all that means capitalism. Why does that mean capitalism? And I'm going to prove all this tonight to you guys with clips if you want to stick around. Whiteness means capitalism. The easiest way to explain it is this. Whiteness means capitalism because the left believes, I'm not saying I believe this, I'm saying the left believes this. The left believes that slavery was created by capitalism. The reason they believe that slavery was created by capitalism, fair enough, Adam, my bad. The reason the left believes that slavery was created by capitalism is because slaves were literally private property. When the left says capitalism, what they mean is private property. That is their definition of it. People who hold private property, that's the bourgeois, versus people who do not hold private property, that's the proletariat. In the Communist Manifesto, the main goal of the Communist Manifesto was to abolish capitalism and private property. So if the left believes that capitalism created slavery, that's because slaves were the private property of the slave owners. Then the left believes that slavery created systemic racism. And systemic racism refers to the system. It's not an individual thing. It is the system. And that system is capitalism. Because the left believes that the only way to get rid of capitalism is to, the left believes that the only way is to get rid of systemic racism is to get rid of capitalism. This is why so the left believes that systemic racism, which was created by capitalism, is responsible for all of the inequality in our society. Because the systems that were built on top of slavery, which were created because of capitalism, that's what systemic racism is. That doesn't matter, bro. Sit back. I need Gen X-Ray. You're one of the people that I need you to sit back and listen tonight. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to be here for very long. Okay? Sit back and listen. So because all of the inequality or inequity was created by systemic racism, what they need to do is to abolish the system that created the inequality and introduce something else. What that means is they want to abolish capitalism because capitalism is responsible for systemic racism and introduce a society based on equity. Every single time you hear equity in the world, whether it be diversity, equity, and inclusion, the Office of Equity at your kid's school district, any sort of equity training anywhere. Equity means Marxism. Because the difference between inequality and equity is the difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. The left wants everyone to end in the same place. They want to reduce all disparities down to zero. Okay? The only way to get rid of systemic racism, which was created by slavery, which was created by capitalism, is to abolish the system that caused systemic racism, capitalism, and introduce a new system that is grounded in equity, which is Marxism. So when we're looking at the Nashville Shooter Manifesto, and we're seeing, and by the way, we also have to acknowledge that there's mental illness involved here. This was obviously a deeply troubled person, was probably bullied by the people that they went to school with in that school, wanted revenge for that. So we cannot dismiss that there's mental illness here. But when this person is saying going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks, with their daddy's Mustang convertibles. Fuck you, little shits. That is a reference to the bourgeois. That's a reference to people who have money. That's rich kids, guys. This is about rich kids. Was Audrey rich? I'm going to bet not. I'm going to bet not. The reason it's written this way is because for at least 15 years now, and a lot longer in some places, and probably a lot longer in Nashville, equity has been integrated into every single part of their schooling. Remember, equity is Marxism. Equity is the replacement for capitalism. Capitalism produces an inherently unequal society. I'm saying what the left thinks, not what I think. Capitalism produces an inherently unequal society, and the answer to that is equity. And so for decades, they have been trying to integrate equity into every part of the school system. Whatever town you're in America, and if you're not in America, just pick a town in America. I want you, while you're watching this, to go onto your school district's website. And I want you just to search for equity. Go onto the main school district website, not the school website, the school district website, and do a search for equity and see how much stuff comes up. Equity is in every single school district in this country. They've been pushing equity into the schools for a really long time. That means that every single person, basically 21 and under, has had a significant amount of equity throughout their entire schooling. They understand these concepts. People on the right don't get this because a lot of them commentating on this, they're like older, they're 30s, 40s, 50s. When they went to school Equity was not fully pushed into the school district yet because this only was completed around about 2008, 2009, 2010. It's not to say that it wasn't happening before that, because it was, but you need to understand, if you were in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you got a fundamentally different education than kids in school are getting now. So when someone in their 30s, 40s, 50s says, "Well, Carlin, Aubrey didn't really know what she was talking about because she doesn't really know the true meanings." That's not correct. Audrey does know. All of them do. We can listen to kids use this language. If I can show you videos of kids that school districts have put on the internet where they are using this language like little SJWs because it's all they've ever known in school. What you got in school if you were older was fundamentally different than what kids are getting now. They completely changed it. So just because you don't understand the definitions does not mean that they don't understand the definitions. They do understand the definitions. That's why you see in this manifesto going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks, their daddy's Mustang convertibles. She did know this. She's got white privilege. White privilege means beneficiary of capitalism. That's what it means. It does not mean white skin color, and I'm going to prove that to you tonight. It means beneficiary of capitalism, the bourgeois, the private property owner. That's what it means. The kids know this because they've been learning it since they were in kindergarten. The older people, 30s, 40s, 50s, don't know this because they were in school before this was integrated fully into the curriculum. You are using the same vocabulary, but you are not using the same dictionary. So you might be using the same words, but those words mean something fundamentally different to the people who are in school now than they did to the people that were in school 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's what we need to wrap our head around, guys, is when we're viewing stuff like this. If you don't know how to speak the language of the left, if you don't know how to speak socialist, you are not going to understand what this says. You might think you know all the words. You might think you know all the meanings to the words, but they mean something fundamentally different to younger people that have gone through the school system more recently than they do to older people who went through the school system a long time ago. Bro, fucking shut your mouth and listen. See, people like this drive me crazy because I can put evidence right in front of them, but they're so interested in repeating conservative talking points over and 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 over again that they don't sit back and listen to what the left is saying. Bro, this is your final warning. If you continue to chat in with the specific goal of gaslighting my audience and confusing people, I'm going to put you in a timeout. And if you keep doing it, I'm going to ban you and I'm going to force you to listen so that I will take away your ability to chat in entirely. So you can either open your ears and listen, or I'm going to take away your ability to speak. I mean, we're going to get there tonight, I suspect, because Jen X-Ray is a fan of Carrie Smith, and so obviously not the brightest crown in the box. Anyway, that's a different story. I have another super chat that came in from Tayton. Why did you go live during my first watch of Soylent Green? I'm so sorry. Soylent Green's a great movie. You should definitely watch it. It's awesome. Oh, he's running away crying. Bye, bitch. Bye. See, these are the people who don't want to learn. So you know what? Goodbye, Gen X-Ray. When you announce your departure, I just ban you. Because if you're gonna be like that bitch and be like, I know more than you, I'm gonna gaslight your chat, then I'm just gonna remove you. You are not fucking worthy of actually learning this shit. So, does anyone, I'm gonna try to go like reasonably slow tonight, guys, because I suspect we're gonna have some people who aren't regular viewers. If you are not regular viewers of my socialism content, that's okay. I want to be able to answer people's questions tonight about what is going on. Let me just pull up my Rumble chat as well. So if you guys have questions, if you are newer to my work, and shout out to everyone watching on Rumble, I appreciate you guys as well. I've got the chat up. I want you to ask questions liberally tonight. Does everyone understand what I've said so far, or is any of it confusing? Because I know that this is a lot. I mean, for people who are regular viewers of my content, it's going to be not like as harsh. It's going to be not as overwhelming. But for people who are new, it might be overwhelming. The amount of information I'm about to throw at you, and that I've already thrown at you to, already. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask. And we're going to walk through this, okay? In God's Hands says, yes, it helps. Thank you, In God's Hands, over on Rumble. Okay, so what I want to do now that we've talked about this manifesto, and remember, this is all about capitalism and private property. That's what this is about. What I want to do is I want to go over and I want to walk through this presentation. Now, this is a presentation that I did it maybe like about a couple months ago, month and a half ago. And I did it as a private webinar, basically to do a debrief on how to speak socialist language after the socialism conference. If you want to watch that, it's available on demand on my Substack. And let me just put the ticker in the bottom. But this is like the actual just PowerPoint presentation. And I just want to go through a couple things. So number one, what does it mean to speak socialist? We've already kind of talked about this, but the far left speaks in a coded language. And the more you learn this coded language, the more that you are going to see socialist show up in your daily life. It's actually kind of crazy. Once you start to learn how to speak socialist, you start seeing socialist everywhere. You're going to hear your kids' teachers speaking socialist. You're going to see socialist on TV commercials. You're going to see I went to the movies with my husband like a month ago to see the new Saw movie, and there was an Indeed.com commercial completely in socialist. And it's actually scary. Once you learn how to identify the socialist language, you start seeing it show up absolutely everywhere. But you have to understand fundamentally that this is a coded language. Again, you might be using the same vocabulary, you are using a completely different dictionary. All right? We also have to accept that if you've been listening to conservative influencers, most of them have no idea what they're talking about. They really don't. And a lot of my anger and frustration is mostly directed not at normal people, but at conservative influencers who have lied to people about what's going on, because there is a huge disconnect between what the left actually believes when you listen to them and what the right wants to convince you that they believe when they're trying to shill for likes and clicks on the internet. There is a big disconnect, and there is a lot of unlearning that needs to happen and needs to take place. We have to start recognizing what is a right-wing talking point versus what is a left-wing reality. Because there are a lot of things that are right-wing talking points, like the woke left wants to destroy Western values. No, they don't. The left does not care about Western values. That is a right-wing, that is a right-wing interpretation. It is not a left-wing reality. The left, when the left cares about something, they publish books on it, they teach classes on it, they do all sorts of trainings on it. You know when the left cares about something because they produce a metric ton of content about it. Like they start integrating it into the classroom. They start passing bills in the legislature. They do college courses on it. They write mountains of books on it. They do periodicals about it. They get the dictionary updated. They literally edit the dictionary. Like they do classroom trainings on it. They do conferences on it. If they care about an issue, they are going to talk about it. So one of the things we have to look for is not only what is the left talking about, but what isn't the left talking about that the right is claiming they talk about. So the stuff like Western values, the left never talks about Western values. I've watched thousands of hours of their training. I've been to their bookstores. I follow their publishers. I know what books they're publishing. They don't talk about it. And the same is true of skin color. I understand why the skin color piece is confusing to people. I really do. Because critical race theory makes it seem like they're talking about skin color all the time. But when you actually listen to the left and what they're saying, every single time they're talking about skin color, they mean capitalism. They mean private property. And I'm going to show that to you tonight. Again, everything that I'm saying tonight and all of the clips that we're watching is based on me sitting my butt down and watching thousands of hours of this stuff and driving myself insane doing it. I've also gone undercover at their events. I break all this stuff down on my Substack. Like, this is what I do all day, every day. And the reason a lot of people think, Carlin, you're not open to feedback. Well, no, I'm really not. I'm not interested in feedback from right-wing talking points because I've done the work. I know what the left is talking about. I know this like the back of my hand. And every single time, universally, that people have claimed that I'm not open to feedback on this, they are shilling me right-wing talking points that have no basis in reality with what the left is talking about. Oh, we've got David Hogg in the chat tonight. What do you think? Where do you think the instinct to be more socialist or more right-wing comes from? Well, I don't think you need to worry about the instinct to be more right-wing because the left has taken over the schools and there ain't going to be guys, they've captured the entire generation. You guys understand, right? That the entire generation in schools right now is gone. They're not going to be right-wingers. They're gone. There may have been a time when kids graduated from school and went into the real world and became more conservative because their workplaces forced them to. That's not happening anymore. The workplaces aren't setting them straight anymore. So I'm not saying that no one's going to be conservative. Obviously there are, but not significant amounts. And they're not changing. There's not going to be any more of this like liberal when you're 20s, conservative when you're 30s sort of thing. That's not going to happen anymore. And the right needs to start wrapping their head around that. Because that's when it's really going to F them over. I'll tell you what. Jenny's getting inky with it, says, so don't conflate the outcomes of their policies with their motives. Seem a lot of people do that. We need to focus on motives and stop the outcomes. Yeah, that's exactly right, guys. There are outcomes of the left's policies that frankly have nothing to do with what the left actually cares about. It might be an outcome that they don't mind, but immigration, for instance. The left is open borders, but it's not something they actually spend a lot of time on. It's just like they are open borders and it's just like they are open borders. They don't think borders should exist, right? And so the immigration stuff is an outcome of them not thinking that borders should exist, but it's not like the left doesn't really have a proactive strategy of we're going to bring all these brown people into the country. Like, that's not what they're doing. The right thinks they're doing that, but that's not what they're doing. The left just doesn't believe that borders should exist. And it's not even something they spend a lot of time on. It's just something they don't care about. Now, what I do think is that the left appreciates the destabilizing factor of mass migration and, like, an influx of people coming over the border. I think they like the destabilization of it, but it's not something they're proactively doing in any real way. So it's one of those things. It's like you do need to separate them. Is like there's beneficial things that happen for them, but some of it's not necessarily according to plan. Okay. This is another good point. A lot of times people think I'm a socialist because I'm constantly explaining what socialists believe. I'm not a socialist. I think all this stuff is crazy. I don't agree with any of this. Well, there are things here and there I agree with. I don't agree with any of this in significant degrees. The goal here, the exercise, is not to agree with them. It's to understand them. You have to understand the enemy that you're fighting. If you do not understand your enemy, you can't predict what they're going to do next, which means they're going to outplay you every single step of the way. So you have to resist the urge to just call everything they're doing crazy and be like, I don't care, this is wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, because then you're not going to understand them. And if you don't understand them, you can't beat them. Prometheus says, do you think the reason for the dissonance in the right is because their influencers only react to people who sound legit racist and not higher level intellectuals? Yes. Prometheus, I think that you have encapsulated that perfectly. Yes, I do. I think that's a lot of it, because what the influencers on the right do, it's so anti-intellectual. It's all about clickbait, guys. It's like, how can I piss off my audience the most to get them to share this so everyone can be pissed off? But it doesn't necessarily reflect an accurate version of what's going on when you actually listen to the people at the top. And so I think this has a lot to do with it, Prometheus. Thank you. All right, last thing before we're going to dig into some clips, okay? I need everyone to understand the 4 goals of the woke left. Please memorize these. We will see them over and over and over again. Number 1, gain power. Gain as much power as possible. Number 2, destabilize the system. Number 3, attack capitalism. Number 4, usher in their Marxist utopia. Every single thing that the left does is to achieve one or more of those 4 goals. Jeff, thank you for being a member of the channel. 100% your strategy of understanding the socialists instead of trying to debunk every little thing is superb. Well, here's the thing, Jeff. It's like we can debunk everything, but debunking everything doesn't actually fix anything. And so it's like we need to try a new strategy, right? All right, so back to the 4 goals. The first thing that the left did was try to gain as much institutional power as possible. They had to get into positions of institutional power in the universities, in media, in Hollywood, entertainment, journalism, the church, your kid's school, whatever it was. They had to get jobs that gave them power to make decisions, not electoral power, not political power. This is not about elected office, although they'll do that too sometimes. But this is about institutional power, getting a job that is very difficult to be fired from, like a tenure track professor, that allows them to make decisions. They use that position of power to destabilize the system. What that means is they use it to cause problems that cause people pain. Okay, so they get into those positions of institutional power, and then they fundamentally destabilize the system. Every single time that Tim Pool is like, I don't understand why the left always veers towards chaos. I don't understand why the left always takes the side of the bad guy. It's because destabilizing the system is a feature. It is not a bug. They're trying to destabilize the system being capitalism. Once they destabilize the system and they've caused people pain, which cause people problems like inflation or whatever the problem is, like riots, protests, like whatever it is. Once they cause problems, they blame capitalism on those problems. So do you know why we had to riot in 2020? It's because of capitalism. Capitalism created systemic racism, which created inequity. There was a book in 2020 called In Defense of Looting that was all about how it was perfectly acceptable to take private property as reparations because capitalism caused systemic racism, and you can and looting is acceptable because you're taking it back. That's a real thing. Every single problem the left causes, they will blame on capitalism. And we hear this over and over and over and over and over again. When you actually listen to their trainings, they always talk about capitalism, at least once, if not the entire training. So they gain institutional power. They use that institutional power to cause problems. They blame the problems that they themselves cause on capitalism. And then they say, you know what we should do instead of capitalism? Marxism. Want to try Marxism? How about Marxism? Things would be way better if we had Marxism. That's what they do. Every time. They follow these 4 goals. Sometimes they do a thing that meets one of those goals. Sometimes they do a thing that meets all 4 of those goals at the same time. But this is the pattern. If you memorize this and apply it to every crazy thing the left does, it will always and inevitably show up. So let's get into some clips. And I want to start with this one. Let me see. I don't know if I set up the sound on this. So hang on. Let me set up the sound. Not there. There. So what is the ultimate goal of the left? What are they ultimately trying to do? They want a revolution. The difference between mine and Yuri's is that there's some overlap and there's some differences. And you can assess for yourself what the differences are. Jeff, thank you for gifting 10 memberships to people on the channel. I do appreciate that. I'm not going to go into this tonight, Nathaniel. I'm really sorry. We have too much to get through. I'm really sorry. Maybe we can talk about this another time. So what does the left want? The left wants a revolution. They want to overthrow capitalism because they very literally believe that no one is free in a society where capitalism exists. And in order to demonstrate that, I want to watch this clip, which is a clip from the Socialism 2023 conference. And you're going to hear this person say it.
And yes, ultimately, and if that wasn't clear from the end of my talk, that will require a revolution. We cannot be free under capitalism. We cannot be free in this society as long as any person is in prison, as long as any person is denied health care for something necessary. No, that will never be free.
Okay, we'll never be free as long as they have capitalism. Now, I want to say this from David, and part of their utopia is that where anything they see as patriarchy has been smashed. David, we're going to get into this later. The left believes that capitalism created the gender binary, which is the patriarchy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a bit. All of these things are interconnected. The patriarchy is connected to capitalism. The nuclear family is connected to the patriarchy, which is connected to capitalism. All of it's connected to racism because capitalism created slavery, which created systemic racism, which our entire society is built on. So we're going to get into this a little bit more, but you have to learn to see this as all interconnected. Because they haven't yet realized that the generation graduating from school is a Trojan horse that's going to severely F up their companies. There's a Trojan horse entering corporate America right now in the form of young professionals that have been indoctrinated in this system their entire lives. Why do CEOs buy into this? Because they don't know they're bringing a Trojan horse into their organizations. That's why. Let me see. All right. Socialists want to abolish all private property. This is in the Communist Manifesto. It is very clear. And when they say private property, they mean capitalism. Private property includes things like your home. They don't want you to own a home. They do not want you to own a private business. And they don't want you to have a nuclear family. This is where abolish the family comes from. Okay? And they believe if you're talking about attacks on parental rights that are going on all over the country right now, the reason you're seeing attacks on parental rights is because they believe that in the nuclear family, kids are private property of their parents in the same way that slaves were the private property of their owners. They conflate the two. At some point, I promise you, the left is going to try to use the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which abolished slavery, to get rid of parental rights. Because they are making the argument that in our system, children are the private property of their parents, and it is their job to liberate children from the adult supremacy of their parents. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But for right now, I need everyone to understand that when they say private property, that means they do not want you to own a home. They do not want you to own a private business. All private business will be outlawed. And they do not want you to have a nuclear family. All of this is under the banner of private property. Every single word you see here is related to capitalism in some way. We're going to talk about that. But bigger picture, when the left uses the term whiteness, white supremacy, anti-racism, it is never, and I mean never, a reference to skin color. This is the big sticking point that the right does not understand Manifesto today and assuming it's about skin color, because it's not. It's not. It is always and forever a reference to private property and capitalism. And we know this because they talk about it openly all the time. There was a teacher in Colorado a couple months ago who got the Colorado Teachers Union to declare capitalism inherently exploitive to children and public schools. The official state of Colorado Teachers Union has denounced capitalism. That's real. That happened. Let's see. This is an image from a socialist magazine. This is famous communist activist Angela Davis. She's like one of their patron saints. And her quote is saying, racism cannot be separated from capitalism. Because again, the left believes that capitalism created slavery, which created systemic racism. And the only way to get rid of systemic racism is to abolish capitalism and build a new society based on equity, which you see everywhere, because equity is code for Marxism. Equity literally means everyone has the same. Equity means sameness. Every time you see equity, you need to think Marxism, because their solution to racism, which is the same as their solution for capitalism, is that they need to abolish capitalism, and they believe that once they abolish capitalism, they will have fixed racism because they will implement a society based on equity, which means Marxism. Does everyone understand that? Does everyone understand that piece? Does anyone have questions? We're going to watch some clips now, but I want to make sure everyone's clear on this. Does anyone have questions about why racism and capitalism are the same thing? Okay. So the first thing I want to watch is actually not in this presentation because I made it after I made this presentation. The first thing I want to watch are clips that I played for my friend Chris Rufo today on Twitter, because there is a famous paper by Cheryl Harris called Whiteness as Property. This was published in the Harvard Law Review in 1993. 20 years later, Cheryl Harris spoke at a symposium at UCLA Law School that was celebrating her paper. This was the 20-year anniversary of Cheryl Harris publishing that paper, and they put on a big symposium that was multi-day. All of the sessions are on YouTube to this day. Everyone can go watch it, but I'm going to show you clips from Cheryl Harris's keynote. In these clips, Cheryl Harris, the person who wrote the paper, Whiteness as Property, is going to explain to you that whiteness is not about skin color. It is about property, that Black people can be white too, and that whiteness and racism is inextricably linked with capitalism. So let's watch this first clip. This is Cheryl Harris explaining that whiteness encompasses non-white people, and whiteness is available to everyone, including Blacks.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
I'm going to play that again.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
Whiteness is not a skin color. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, which means that some people are privileged and some people are not. In this clip, Cheryl is going to explain that you don't have to be white to have whiteness.
Secondly, post-racialism's commitment to protect some value in whiteness, however relative, what Derek Bell called the promise not to be the face at the bottom of the well, it coexists with expanding whiteness to encompass non-whites. And I think Chuck was alluding to this a little bit yesterday. Post-racial whiteness is conditionally available to persons of any racial group, even some Blacks.
Post-racial whiteness is available to Black people. How on earth could post-racial whiteness be available to Black people if it was about skin color, guys? In this, she explains that race is private property.
Post-racialism privileges self-designation. You are what you say you are. And post-racialism conceptualizes racial identity as private property on which the state cannot infringe.
Post-racialism constructs race as private property. Private property means capitalism. And in this clip, she explicitly connects capitalism and race.
Rather than mobilizing a sense of linked fate, that dismantling racial hierarchy is joined with addressing the problem of capitalism, these projects are placed in opposition, and the challenge to white entitlement or white privilege is then recast as an elitist, anti-populist project.
They're trying to inextricably link racism and capitalism. And this is the woman who explicitly wrote the paper on it that Chris Rufo today referenced on Twitter as proof that white skin is somehow a valuable commodity, when Cheryl Harris is explicitly saying, Chris, that you don't have to be white to access whiteness. But let's go back to my other presentation because I have a lot more clips to show you. Let's go back. Not to that one. This one. Let me get into my presentation here. Next, I want to go to this one. This is from a Socialism Saturday highlight reel. And if you don't come to Socialism Saturday, I want to encourage you to on Saturdays at 6 p.m. We also are doing like midweek socialism now. Like almost every single day is Socialism Day on my channel now. I've gotten a little bit obsessed. But we do it every Saturday at 6 p.m. as a formal thing. But let's watch this. This is from a socialist podcast, One of the people in this podcast is a professor at the University of Washington. I don't remember what this guy does, but he's talking with a professor at the University of Washington. And that's not what I want to show you my presenter notes. I want you guys to see the nice one. Hang on. I want to show you my presenter notes. Not that one. This one. That's much nicer for everyone. So you're going to hear them. What I want you to listen for is them talking about capitalism and whiteness interchangeably.
And, you know, for me, when I think about the way that capitalism works, it's really impossible to divide it from whiteness as a kind of a mechanism of creating order and creating hierarchy. And that's what race does in general, right? But I think it's really impossible to talk about how capitalism functions in people's everyday lives without talking about the role that whiteness has played in that.
Absolutely. And even more specifically, how like the current structures of capitalism were built hand in hand while slavery and while the country or people as a whole were basically creating these race classifications as a way to force labor onto someone. And that in of itself, that like race was really invented like as a way to do that, as like a mechanism to force labor, and or from a way to ensure that hierarchy of that, like, you know, some people will get something better than the other person, and then that creates sort of a hierarchy that you just kind of mentioned.
So some people get something better than another person is related to race, which is exactly what we saw in the Nashville shooter manifesto, them talking about the things that other people have that are better than them. This is inextricably linked with the left-wing ideology, guys. We're going to hear this over and over and over again. I want to address producer man, but Marxists are always involved in grifting and money grabs. This is not the point. Number one, the Communist Manifesto explicitly says that Marxists are allowed to engage in capitalism as long as they're doing so to try to overthrow it. So they're allowed to do that. Number two, as I said earlier, and you may not have been here for it, this is not about debunking them. This is about understanding them. And regardless of whether they're doing this or not, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't change the fundamental ideology that they believe. All right. I want to watch this video. This is from a teacher trainer from, she does teacher training all over the country. She is probably working with your kid's school district right now. Okay, maybe not yours specifically, but this woman does work with school districts all over the country. See, she's a socialist. She was retained. How I became familiar with her is she did work with the Cambridge, Massachusetts school district, which you can see there's a tweet right there from the Cambridge, Massachusetts school district Twitter account. They paid this woman $32,000 to come in and train their teachers. And now I want you to listen to this woman talking about how you need to abolish capitalism and whiteness basically interchangeably. Let's listen. Oh, do I not have the clip? Oh, no. Why doesn't that clip work? Why doesn't it work? Oh, no. Hang on. Hang on. I'll find it right quick. Oh, no. I had it earlier. It's on my Twitter. I know it's on my Twitter. Hang on. Oh, shit. That's not my Twitter. That's not my Twitter. Hang on. Hang on. I'm going to show you this clip, though. I do have it. Okay. Okay. Hang on. I don't know why that doesn't work. I'll have to fix that later. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Wait, you guys don't hear sound? No sound? Okay, hang on. Sorry. We'll do that again. Sorry about that.
Based on the people that we're citing here, Angela Davis, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and others that a lot of their work is inseparable from anti-capitalism. Is abolitionist teaching anti-capitalist by nature?
Abolition is anti-capitalist by nature. You know, we know right now that capitalism is the structure that we are under. And so we're going to use this structure to our best ability. But what we also know is that capitalism will not free us.
And you got to remember that this country was built off of stolen Black labor, and that all of those folks who are positions of power who have that money, you got it because you stole it. You know, and I think, you know, it's always so funny. Can I throw money at that? I'm like, yo, that money's mine. Like, that money is mine, actually. You stole it. You know, and I think, of course, you know, being, you know, an abolitionist is anti-capitalism, right? Because there's a connection between capitalism and slavery in this country. There's a capitalism between, you know, how communities like redlining were built to disenfranchise people, how, you know, the hierarchy of structures in organizations, who gets paid and who has the power to say this, that's all capitalism. And honestly, to me, that's whiteness. And we have to eradicate whiteness. We have to abolish whiteness as well. And
last word, Goldie.
There is a connection between capitalism and slavery, and to me, and that's whiteness, and we have to abolish capitalism, and we have to abolish whiteness as well. This person is training teachers to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars for a couple days of training all over the country, and that's what they're teaching, guys. That's what they're teaching, because that is what they believe. So let me get my other screen back up. There we go. Let's see. So this is another thing I want to bring up. And this is just like, anytime someone questions me whether or not like racism means capitalism, I told you guys, socialists literally publish books about everything that they believe. Everything. They have tons of socialist book publishers. A couple months ago, one of the socialist book publishers named Veriso Books literally published a book that's called What is Anti-Racism? And Why it Means Anti-Capitalism. Like, can we be more clear than this? And this thumbnail is from the video presentation they did for the launch of this book in London. And the woman in that thumbnail, this is the author of the book right here, this guy. But this woman is a woman named Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who talks about something called racial capitalism, which again, they inextricably link capitalism and racism because they believe in this country, capitalism created slavery. I mean, Rufo can argue with me all he wants, but Rufo is wrong. He's just wrong. And so I hope, because I know Rufo's a smart guy and he's intellectually honest, I hope that he will look at the information and decide to rethink his position, because the author of the paper that he's citing contradicts him. It's like, bro. No, James Lindsay doesn't do this, Frank. He doesn't do this. When was the last time James Lindsay showed you any of the things I'm doing now? Again, I mad respect James Lindsay, but can we stop pretending he's doing things he's not doing? Can we stop? I know you guys love to suck his cock. I really do. I get it. He's a very handsome man. But like, can we please stop pretending that James Lindsay is doing things he's not doing? Thank you. That's systemic racism. We talked about that earlier. Let's see. So here is a clip. This is another clip from the, yes, this is loaded. This is another clip from the Socialism 2023 conference that I infiltrated. What you're going to hear him say on this is, what you're going to hear this person say is that anti-racist, okay, so this person is a member of Black Lives Matter in Schools. He is on the committee for Black Lives Matter in Schools. By the way, guys, just because Black Lives Matter is a corrupt organization doesn't mean that Black Lives Matter curriculum isn't in schools. Black Lives, almost all of the money, thank you, Mandatory Carry, appreciate it. Almost all of the money that Black Lives Matter raised went into developing curriculum and getting their curriculum into public schools. And your conservative media has not reported on this. It is in schools everywhere. So what we're going to hear on this is a member of the Black Lives Matter in Education Board. And what he's going to say is that the reason that they are pushing anti-racist education into schools is to create a socialist world. Why is it to create a socialist world? Because anti-racism means anti-capitalism. Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. That was all about anti-capitalism. Everything related to anti-racism is about anti-capitalism. And we know that because the real socialists who run Black Lives Matter in schools are saying this is not about creating racial justice. This is not creating a fair world. This is about creating a socialist world. Let's listen.
So I just want to wrap up by talking about why I think this struggle for anti-racist education right now, it should be a central fight for the left, for the socialist movement in this country, for everyone, and struggles for social justice. I think too often the left organizations have seen education as just one among many arenas of struggle instead of seeing it as a centrally, strategically important struggle that has the potential to bring together tens of millions of people. When you think of everyone as a public school student and all the parents and all the educators who are unionized, this is like a key battle. This should have always been a major focus of those of us who want to transform the world and see a socialist society, as a site that can bring together millions of multiracial people together in a common struggle.
This should have always been a major focus for those of us who want to create a socialist society, is pushing anti-racist education into schools. Do people get it? Every single time they're talking about race, it's not really about race. The only connection to race is that they believe that capitalism created slavery, which has created systemic racism, and the only way to get rid of systemic racism is by getting rid of capitalism. Thanks, Tyrone. I hope you come back and watch the rest of it sometime. I know it's late. That's the connection to race. But I want to give you guys another example, because it's not just race that they use as code for capitalism. They use all sorts of words as code for capitalism. And we're going to be starting to talk about some more in the back half of the presentation. But the left calls everyone they disagree with fascist, right? Well, does anyone want to take a guess what fascism means? According to the left, this clip is from an Antifa conference at Hofstra University. They literally had an Antifa conference earlier this year. I forget the exact month it was, but it was this was this year. And in this clip, you're going to see a professor of economics define fascism, which they call anyone who disagrees with them all the time a right-wing fascist, right? You're going to see the real definition of what they mean when they say fascism. Let's watch.
Now, I do want to point out that I'm not a traditional economist, and I hope you feel that way by the time this is over. But it's neo, and someone mentioned earlier yesterday that being anti-fascist meant being anti-capitalist, and I'd like to just qualify that a little bit, because I believe being anti-fascist means being anti-free market capitalist. That there is liberal capitalism, managed capitalism that is possible. We've gone beyond it, and we've been beyond it for 40 years. And I guess the question...
Being anti-fascist means being anti-free market capitalist? This is not the only clip that I have of them defining fascism as capitalism. Remember, guys, Their number one enemy is capitalism. It's not white people. It's not men. It's not any of these things. Their number one enemy, what most of their coded language means, is some reference to capitalism. It's not always the same reference to capitalism, but once you understand that the core of the argument is about capitalism, you start to understand the left in an entirely new way. Is it right to say that they chose their code names purposefully so that the general public will think they're talking about race and whiteness in order to create confusion and disruption? Yes. Because what is the right doing right now? The right is reading about race. Race has nothing to do with what the Nashville shooter did. But it keeps the right constantly distracted, and the left loves this because every single time the right is distracted by like race, the left uses it against them, and the problem that it has nothing to do with race. They're just constantly like spinning their wheels, complaining about something that the left doesn't even care about. They really don't. They do not talk about race at all. All right. So we're going to get into some other aspects of this now because we've already covered that whiteness means capitalism. But now I want to go into some other things that the left talks about in the cultural Marxism area, because what I want you guys to do is see how all of this is connected. Do you want to know why a trans person shot up a school because of like the rich kids that they didn't like when they went to school? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because the left believes that capitalism created the gender binary. So every single time you hear the left complaining about gender in some way, the patriarchy, how women are oppressed, etc., 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 that comes from capitalism. Because what the left believes is that capitalism created the gender binary to keep women in the home in oppressive gender roles where women were not allowed to earn money. Men got to go work in the real world and earn all the money and therefore have all the power, which kept women oppressed. That is the gender binary. That is the patriarchy. The nuclear family, which is created by women working in the home, doing the unpaid labor of raising the future generation of proletarian workers, aka children. The work that the oppressed women do in the home for free creates the nuclear family, which reproduces and upholds capitalism. Okay, so now we've connected whiteness, which means capitalism, to the gender binary and to the abolition of the nuclear family. When we get into the gender binary, we're also going to get into queer Marxism. Queer Marxism is what is transing your kids. It's what has caused 40 to 50% of kids to think they are gender queer or gender non-binary. That is all related to the gender binary, which the left is trying to abolish. Okay? But first, I want to show you this clip. And this is all about, this will basically reiterate what I just said, because I want you to hear this from the actual socialists. So again, this is a professor at DePaul University, current professor at DePaul University right now, talking, this was at the Socialism 2023 conference, and this person is going to reiterate everything that I just told you. Let's listen.
So on August 23rd.
Hang on. Jeff, you're so generous. Thank you. I really do appreciate this. Thank you.
At the first debate of the U.S. Republican presidential primary candidates, multimillionaire Vivek Ramaswamy called for the abolition of the Department of Education. His argument hinged on how education starts in the home, and he closed by saying the nuclear family is the greatest form of government known to mankind. His glorification of the nuclear family is representative of the value set held by most on the far right. The idea that heterosexual cisgender couples with children are the beating heart of a free and prosperous nation. Underneath that belief, we see its ideological roots deep in the gender binary. The gender binary is a white supremacist invention, born from men in power in the division of labor and care work in primitive Western Europe. I know, Oliver, it sucks. Male paternity became the absolute determinant of heritable wealth and property as class society was developing. Men in power sought exclusive right to their power, and women were excluded from participation in power structures. Domestic labor and care work were feminized and devalued. The gender binary was one aspect of the cultural devastation wrought by colonization. Prior to colonization, indigenous cultures the world over had more than two genders, with trans and non-binary individuals often holding positions of leadership. Expansive, non-binary gender expression and reproductive autonomy through contraception and abortion are ancient, sacred practices, and their repression has long been a tool of white supremacy.
All right, there was a lot there. But again, basically what that person said is, and we're going to hear more from this, if anyone has questions about what they just watched, please put them in the chat now because I'll answer them in a second. What she just said is capitalism created the gender binary, which put women in the home in the oppressive gender roles, men in the workplace, and the oppressive gender roles created the nuclear family. And what they want to do to get rid of the gender binary, to get rid of those oppressive gender roles, is to queer gender, making it non-binary, to abolish the gender binary. Does everyone understand what they just saw? Because I know that was a lot, what was just in that one clip, and we're going to watch the second part of that clip now. Yes, Prometheus, this is correct. Trans and non-binary and reproductive justice are connected. So one of the socialist events that I went undercover at was a socialist reproductive justice conference. And they talk about abortion and trans issues in the same presentations. They do not distinguish between the issues related to abortion and the issues related to trans, because both of those things are about disrupting the gender binary. Abortion disrupts the gender binary because it frees women from the oppressive gender roles of being in the home and raising the children. Trans, which normal trans people and queer Marxists are not the same thing. We'll talk about that in a second. But basically, gender ideology that's about queering the children is also about liberating people from the gender binary. So you're right. Those two things are inextricably linked in the land of socialists. All right. We're going to now listen to the second part of this clip in which Mary has just laid this out. And by the way, Mary is a professor of nursing. Someone asked what she's a professor of nursing at DePaul University. Let's listen to the second part of this clip.
When Ramaswamy hails the nuclear family as the greatest form of governance, he is saying that the oppressive binary gender roles necessary to maintain the nuclear family are where oppressive government policies begin. Binary gender contributes to the creation and maintenance of a lower class of marginalized genders, cis and trans women, other trans people, non-binary and gender non-conforming folks who can then be more easily dehumanized and exploited. This is our starting point, the gender binary and its oppressive function. Colluding with white supremacy, colonization, and capitalism, we find the gender binary and ideology behind attacks on abortion, the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes, the mass incarceration of Black and brown people, the separation of families at the border, the criminalization of trans existence. Anything outside its narrow stricture is threatening to it and thus will be a target of the right.
All right. Does everyone understand that? White supremacy is related to the gender binary because capitalism created both of them. Their ultimate goal is to abolish capitalism, for which they think that abolishing capitalism will get rid of racism, and they need to abolish the gender binary because before they abolish capitalism. Now, why do they need to abolish the gender binary? Because the gender binary upholds the nuclear family, and they believe that they cannot abolish capitalism while the nuclear family still exists. So some people always ask me, they ask, how do socialists plan to have kids after they abolish the nuclear family? So I just want to watch this clip really. No, let's not. We're not worrying about that, Monica. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all in the slightest if cis is a slur. I don't really remember what this clip is, but like, so let's just watch.
So I published 2 articles in the last year. They both are online. The long one is in EndNotes.
Hang on, I do remember this now. Okay, so this person is interesting. This person just wrote a book called "Abolish the Family: Communism, Communizing Care," or something like that. We just watched a presentation from this person not too long ago. And so this person is a socialist activist, speaker at the Socialism Conference, although this clip was not from the Socialism Conference. And so this person is going to describe how communists want to, socialist, communist, Marxist, we use those 3 interchangeably, how they plan to have kids after they abolish the nuclear family. Oh, no, that wasn't what I wanted to do. No, why did it go there? Oh, no. I just screwed up. Hang on, let me get back to that clip. It's late, okay? There we go. Sorry about that.
So I published 2 articles in the last year. They both are online. The long one is in EndNotes, a communist journal, and it's a history of the demand to abolish the family, surveying its multiple meanings since the Communist Manifesto, looking at Marx and Engels seeking to abolish the family as an attack on bourgeois society, Kollontai looking to collectivize.
Seeking to abolish the family as an attack on bourgeois society. Bourgeois means capitalist.
Reproductive labor and produce gender equality, and then the attack.
Oh shit! I've never heard someone say that. Hang on. What did Emmy O'Brien just say? Looking to collectivize reproductive labor. I totally missed that. I completely missed that the last time we watched this. I mean, it was a long ass time ago that we watched this. They're looking to collectivize reproductive labor. What does that mean? Pop quiz for the chat. What does that mean? You can do the pop quiz now too if you want. What does that mean? What does collectivizing reproductive labor mean? It's weird for me to watch myself. What does that mean? Does mean abolish the family, H-Tom, but like more specifically than that, the giver, surrogacy, baby pods, test tube babies, surrogacy, handmaidens. They want to collectivize reproductive labor. How they are going to deal with the issue of the nuclear family. And again, remember, socialists believe your children are private property and it is their job to liberate your children from being your private property. So then what happens? How do we have children after that? They want to collectivize reproductive labor, which means surrogacy. It means your children will not be your children, but the party's children. That's right. This is real, guys. They're trying to do this right now. There are books called Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family. Let's see. We'll talk about that kitchen issue another day. So we're going to get into queer a little bit because queer is really important here. What I need people to understand for this is that trans and queer are not the same thing. Trans upholds the gender binary. Queer wants to abolish the gender binary. So however you feel about trans people, you need to put that aside. Because if a person is transitioning from a woman to a man or a man to a woman, they are fundamentally upholding the gender binary. Queer wants to abolish the gender binary because remember, they believe capitalism created the gender binary, which created the nuclear family. If they abolish the gender binary, that is an attack both on capitalism and on the nuclear family, which upholds capitalism. And they do not believe that they can get rid of capitalism without getting rid of the nuclear family. So abolishing the gender binary, this idea of non-binary, why all these kids are non-binary, why people are going by they, them, or they, he, or they, she, anyone that's going as not a man or a woman, that is what they're trying to do. Your kids in school that are identifying as genderqueer or gender fluid or any of these things where they're not identifying as a man or a woman, that is a specific strategy by leftists to abolish the gender binary, which is an attack on the nuclear family and an attack on capitalism. Because if they're not adhering to the gender binary, then it's not like the nuclear family is inevitably not going to exist as we know it. And that's when the fun really begins. Okay, so people need to understand that specifically. Let's see. Anytime you see the word queer, and again, this is in teacher ed programs, guys. This is a teacher education program out of the University of Colorado called A Queer Endeavor, where they are literally teaching queer biology. Nature is queer. Anytime you hear the word queer, queer is a far left political ideology. We are going to watch a clip from a show called The Book of Queer. The Book of Queer was on Discovery Plus, and in the very first episode of The Book of Queer, they talk about Abraham Lincoln being gay. Now, I don't care whether or not he was or wasn't. That's not the point. The point is that they are using things like The Book of Queer to introduce queer theory to the general public. This is a quote from the presentation we're going to watch, or from the clip we're going to watch, from David Halperin, who is a queer theorist who defines queer as whatever is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. Queer is not about being gay. Queer is not about being trans. You do not have to be gay to be queer. You do not have to be trans to be queer. They have hijacked this word to make it mean something different. Queer is a far left political ideology that is fundamentally designed to destabilize the system. Remember, we talked about this earlier. The 4 goals of the woke left are always the same. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Queer theory is designed to destabilize the system. And we know that because they define queer as whatever is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, and the dominant. Let's listen. This is the clip from the show, The Book of Queer.
Howdy, I'm Eric Cervini, the Book of Queer's resident homo historian. Welcome to the footnotes. You may have noticed that we haven't labeled Abe gay because that wouldn't make too much sense. Why? Because sexuality, just like race and gender, is what we call a social construct, or a concept that we as a society just came up with. And during Lincoln's time, the idea of a homosexual hadn't yet been conceived or constructed in the English language. For hundreds of years, people didn't agree on a word for men who loved men. And given all of these changes in language throughout history, that's why we love the word queer. All it means, in the words of queer theorist David Halperin, is whatever's at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. And hey, we may even come up with newer social constructs to describe ourselves in the future. After all, they're really just figments of our collective imagination.
So has everyone got that? That's what queer theory means. It does not mean gay. It does not mean trans. It means whatever is at odds with the normal or the dominant. And I'm going to show you more clips that prove that. Monica says, so do they believe that anyone who upholds the gender binary is inherently a fascist? Yes, they do. Very good, Monica, because fascism is capitalism. And so if you uphold the gender binary, you are upholding capitalism, and that makes you a fascist. See, all these things are connected, guys. All of them are connected. And if anyone else has questions, please feel free to chat them in anytime. I want to go to this clip, which this is a clip that backs up what that clip just said. So what we're going to watch now is a clip from a Marxist meeting of some sort. This is from a stream I did called Queer Marxism Marathon. It's like a 4-hour stream where we're just watching queer Marxism the whole time. It's as interesting as it sounds. And in this, you are going to hear a leftist talk about how they identify as queer to go against the normal, how it is fundamentally destabilizing to normativity. Let's listen.
Went back to finish my degree with every intention of going into academia and becoming an intellectual of some sort. But in DC, I discovered naked dancing, and I discovered that I could make money off of my body and support myself in that way. And given what I had come to understand.
Just to be very clear, guys, socialists are very pro sex work. And so you do have a lot of socialists who do sex work. It's something they're very, very like, it's just one of their things that they do. Okay.
Understand from queer left thinking and queer left work, I went really hard in that direction. So, for me, dancing, sex work, pornography became a way of expressing my radical sort of position within the world, my desire to live a queer life, my desire to live a non-corporate life, a non-assimilated life. And like I said, I went really hard that way for like over a decade. And
see, what did I tell you? The whole thing about queer culture, it has nothing to do with, it honestly really doesn't have anything to do with being gay. It has nothing to do with who you sleep with. Queer is about not assimilating to normie, cis heteronormative culture. It is about rebelling against everything that most people in society do. Rebelling against having a traditional biological family, rebelling against kind of like getting married, settling down. They don't want to do any of this stuff. Having a relationship that only has like, two people in it. They're very big on polyamorous relationships. There's a town, Somerville, Massachusetts, just legalized polyamorous marriage. So like marriage, basically polygamy, marriage with more than like two people in it. And so when you think queer, they're never going to define it because queer defies definition in the eyes of these people. Queer is anything that destabilizes the system. Again, 4 goals of the woke left. Gain as much power. We don't need to listen to me talk about the 4 goals of the woke left, but you get the idea. This guy fundamentally said, I want to live a queer lifestyle that goes against the norm. Because queer is about rejecting the normal. Here's another clip that is basically going to say the same thing. I'm pretty sure this is our favorite socialist activist, which is Violet. Violet is the craziest queer Marxist you're ever going to meet. Get ready. Hang on to your hat.
If queer is not merely an identity, but as the Mary Nardini gang point out, the qualitative position of opposition to presentations of stability and a total rejection.
Violet just defined being queer as the qualitative opposition to presentations of stability and is about to say, I think, a total rejection of something related to normativity. To be queer is opposition to the presentations of stability. What is the second goal of the woke left? Destabilize the system. I'm sorry that we're going back and listening to things a couple times, guys, but I really think that this is important because I want you to hear from their mouth what they believe, and it can get a little complicated, and sometimes it can be easy to kind of like glaze over because it's boring, but that's why we go back and we listen a couple times because I really want you guys to hear and understand it. Let's listen again.
The law, and that involves refusing to constitute one's body as a source of labor power. As Michelle pointed out earlier, all work comes with gendered expectations. If queer is not merely an identity, but as the Mary Nardini gang point out, the qualitative position of opposition to presentations of stability and a total rejection of the regime of the normal, then we can understand.
A total rejection of the regime of the normal. And notice Violet also talked about how all work is gendered. That's another reference to capitalism creating the gender binary because all work is gendered under the gender binary, right? Saying it flat out, queer is a rejection of the normal. It's not about gay. It's not about trans. It's about rejecting the normal, which is designed fundamentally to destabilize the system. And in this clip, they're going to talk about how queer activists overtly reject capitalism, which makes sense if we remind ourselves again, whiteness means capitalism. Capitalism created slavery. Slavery created systemic racism. They want to overthrow capitalism. Queer activists fundamentally reject capitalism. Let's listen.
What we wanted to do instead was flip the script altogether. Instead of saying that transsubjectivity was rooted in a desire to do away with one's body, we wanted to suggest the inverse, that dysphoria is nothing but the howl of the body's anguish against its appropriation by sexuation and its insertion into the capitalist mode of production.
Holy shit. That is a mouthful. I want to read you what Violet just said. Thank God we have subtitles. Hang on. Hang on. Trans doublespeak, that's coded language too? Yes, it is. Yeah. The public thinks they mean transgender, but socialists mean transformative. That's right. So I bet Lone Wolf said that in the chat. When someone who has been integrated into queer theory, like I'm betting Aubrey was, the Nashville shooter. When someone is integrated into queer theory, when they say trans, they do not mean transition. Transition upholds the gender binary. When queer Marxists say trans, they mean transform or transcend. Transform gender, transcend gender. If you don't believe me, just Google it. Seriously, transform gender, transcend gender. You will see these things come up where they're talking about them on queer activist website because they don't want people transitioning from men to women or woman to men. They want people to transition into non-binary. Because someone transitioning from a man to a woman or a woman to a man doesn't abolish the gender binary. Only going to non-binary abolishes the gender binary. This is why with kids in school, we aren't like a lot more kids are identifying as trans, sure, but like what pronouns are they using? They're using they, them pronouns. Anyone that uses a they, them pronoun or he, they, or she, they, or they, anything, or anything that is not he or she, anything that uses non-binary pronouns is a queer Marxist, whether they know it or not. It is a nod to queer Marxism. It's about abolishing the gender binary. Oh shit, I did it again. I went all the way back again. Oh no. Anyway, let's listen to this clip again. I apologize for screwing this up. It's late. I clicked the wrong thing. Here it is again.
What we wanted to do instead was flip the script altogether. Instead of saying that transsubjectivity was rooted in a desire to do away with one's body, we wanted to suggest the inverse, that dysphoria is nothing but the howl of the body's anguish against its appropriation by sexuation and its insertion into the capitalist mode of production.
Dysphoria is nothing but the body's howl of anguish for insertion into the capitalist mode of production. And if I let that clip continue to play, and you can find it on my channel if you want to, Violet would continue to go on and on and on and on and on about how capitalism is bad, because all of this fundamentally relates back to capitalism. And all of this is connected to their desire to abolish the nuclear family. So now we're going to listen to our favorite abolish the family socialist say clearly, this woman has written 2 books about abolishing the family. She is going to say clearly that queer liberation, queer Marxism is directly related to abolishing the biological nuclear family. Let's listen.
Do transgender Marxists abolish the family? I suppose this is not a question I feel like posing in separation from the question of abolishing capitalism. Your book's blurb is very clear that in order to achieve transgender liberation, abolishing capitalism is the sine qua non. These things cannot happen separate from one another. Queer
Marxism, transgender Marxism is related to the nuclear family, because Sophie literally wrote the book on abolishing the nuclear family, which is inextricably linked with abolishing capitalism. But that's not the only one I have saying that. I also have our old friend Mary, again, from the Socialism Conference, discussing how queer Marxism is inextricably linked to abolish the family.
But some of their fears may be legitimate, because destroying the nuclear family through sexual liberation and queer relationship anarchy sounds pretty great.
Abolishing the nuclear family through sexual liberation and queer relationships sounds pretty great. And that's because, guys, when we're talking about the left, what you need to understand is capitalism, which is synonymous with whiteness, created the gender binary, which supports the nuclear family, which upholds capitalism. All of these things are linked together. These things do not exist separately from each other. They may be talked about separately in the general zeitgeist, but all of these things are inextricably linked together. And so, when we are viewing things like this, the Nashville Manifesto, saying going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks, their daddy's Mustang convertibles. That's about capitalism. That's about private property. This is what they learned in school. There's also mental illness involved. But when they're saying those crackers, they're referencing the rich kids. The term crackers is not about race. It is about envying what the rich kids had that Aubrey did not have. Aubrey, a confused trans person, probably sucked into queer Marxist ideology because they were taught that in school, probably had I wouldn't be surprised if they were autistic, probably bullied a lot in schools by the white rich kids, which is why they're referred to as crackers, because it was Nashville. I mean, come on, it is what it is. A private school in Nashville, they're mostly going to be white, right? But you need to understand that the majority of this manifesto is not actually about their skin color. It's not even about the F word that's used in it. It's not about sexuality. It's not about any of these things. This is about jealousy over the have versus the have-nots. Marxist ideology teaches you that you are entitled to being provided with whatever you need. They believe that the state should provide everything. They believe that the state should have provided all of Aubrey's trans reassignment surgeries, all of their medical information, all of their medical needs to be like a trans person, non-binary person. By the way, trans surgery is considered the ultimate commitment to the far left queer ideology. How do I know that? The book Transgender Marxism told me so. Does everyone see? Now that we have spent almost 2 hours watching clips from leftists, and every single thing I showed you in these clips is being taught to your kids in public school today. Every single thing I showed you is being taught to your children in public school, starting in kindergarten, guys. Every single thing. Does it make more sense to people now why this is obvious socialist if you know what to look for? It's resentment. It's grievance. It's I'm entitled. It's I don't like these kids because they have fancy private schools with the fancy khakis and sports backpacks and their daddy's Mustangs. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. So I want to pause before we wrap up for the night because it's 1 a.m. I want to just open for questions. Do people have questions? Is this confusing? Does this make sense? We will lose until people understand this. There is no way to beat these people until people understand this. And when I'm fighting with Chris Rufo on Twitter because I can play him a clip of Cheryl Harris literally saying that whiteness is available to Black people and is not dependent on skin color, I kind of get a little bit frustrated because he should know better. But if the right is going to continue to focus on race without looking at the bigger picture, we are so effed, it's not even funny. So if people have questions, now's the time. Or I guess if you're watching this after the fact, leave them in the comments and I'll answer them. But I don't know how to get people on the right to see this. Because when they see a manifesto like this, literally all they talk about is skin color when this is not about skin color at all. Mop yellow hair is probably referring to someone specific that bullied her, is my bet. She's referring to something specific. Do all white people have blonde hair? I don't have blonde hair. Not all white people have blonde hair. That was a reference to a specific person. So does anyone have questions? I'm not seeing any. So I have to assume that I did a pretty good job of breaking it down and hitting you over the head with as much like information as I had at the ready right now. I have way more clips than this, guys. If you want to get my latest stuff, what you need to do is go over to my Substack, and I'm starting to build out a video library right up here, the video vault. I'm starting to build out a video library of clips like this so you can find it all in one place, so you can hear from socialists yourself that are saying this stuff more than I have in this presentation. I have some on my channel too, but it's harder to find them on my channel. I break down this stuff all the time on my Substack, guys. If you want to subscribe, carlin.substack.com. I have a series called the Woke 101 series that is an introduction to all of this stuff. I have the Woke Mind series, which is about the psychology of the woke left. I cover news and current events that explain this, and I explain how it relates back to what the left believes. We do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. You can come and hear from the real socialists. We watch leftists and socialists throughout the week as well, just for fun, for extra. So you can come to any of my presentations on that and actually hear from them. Because I don't want you to take my word for it. I played you a mountain of clips tonight. And those aren't even like, that is a tip of the iceberg of the amount of stuff that I have. But you're hearing it from them. The left tells you what they think. The left tells you what they're doing. All you need to do is listen. And that's why I'm putting all this stuff on my Substack. You can sign up for free. There's a lot of free content on my Substack. I'm trying to get 200 new paying subscribers to be able to fund this, because finding all this stuff and making all these clips takes a ton of time. Takes a lot of time. And so when you fund my work through $8 a month, $80 a year, you are paying for my time to be able to do this. And I have a goal of hitting 200 more paid subscribers by the end of the year. I need to hit that to stay on track to make this a viable enterprise for next year. And so if you appreciate this, please sign up on my Substack. Again, $8 a month, $80 a year. I am 100% grassroots funded because I don't want any political bigwigs breathing down my neck telling me what to say. I am only accountable to you and showing you the truth. And I might not always say things that you like, but I will show you what's going on, and then you can decide for yourself what you think about it. And if you think I'm taking this stuff out of context, everything is public on my YouTube channel. All of the clips we watched tonight are from things that are on my YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch, or it's all most of it's documented on the Substack as well. But you can always go back and watch. Watch the full thing. Fact check me if you think I took it out of context, truly, because I don't. At least I don't intend to. I don't think I ever have, but Jenny, thank you. Awesome job breaking this down. Great way to get newbies caught up and very valuable to help people understand what's really going on. I appreciate that. Lone Wolf says, when I get paid, I'll get the yearly subscription. I really do appreciate that, Lone Wolf. Thank you. Tweeter Trash over on Rumble says in all capitals because Tweeter Trash only uses capital letters. I'm still confused on who has the wee and hoo-ha's. I keep watching the Daily Wire, the largest creator of trans content on the internet. I just don't feel like I have it down yet. Yeah, the Daily Wire ain't going to teach you this stuff, guys, because there's no money in teaching people this stuff. I'll tell you what, you ain't going to get rich doing that. And I'm not doing outrage content. I want to show you what's going on. So that's what's going on. If you are running into influencers who do not understand that capitalism means whiteness or whiteness means capitalism, they don't know what's going on. If you're listening to influencers that do not understand that there's a difference between trans and queer, then they don't understand what's going on. If you are running into influencers who cannot describe how capitalism creates the gender binary and upholds the nuclear family and why they want to abolish the nuclear family, because it's going to get rid of capitalism, they don't know what's going on. If you are running into influencers who believe that the left just hates white people and men and that's all it is, they don't know what's going on. They do not understand the content. They do not understand the left. Make sure you're always differentiating between what the left is telling us they believe and how the right is using a right-wing perspective to get clicks and likes on the internet. Because there is a big difference. There may have been a time when the right understood the left. The right does not understand the left anymore because the right doesn't actually listen to the left. They only look for things that they can use for clicks and outrage and, likes and making money on the internet, which is usually the most absurd content that's clipped out of context just to make you angry. I understand that sometimes it's fun to watch that content. I really do. But it is not reflective of what the left believes. It is not reflective of what the left is doing. And what the left is actually doing is so much more dangerous than what the right is telling you the left is doing. It's so much more dangerous. What the left is doing is they want to take away our ability to own a home, to own land, to own a car, to have a family, to have rights over your children. They want to take away your ability to own a business. They want to take away your ability to make money for yourself. In the Marxist utopia that they want to build, there will be no private business, guys. No private business. No private health care. No private education. No homeschooling. Homeschooling will be outlawed. And in order to achieve that, they are using the public schools to teach your kids Marxism drip by drip by drip by drip by drip, starting when they're 5 years old. That is why we have seen an exponential increase in the amount of non-binary gender fluid kids. It is a direct attack on the gender binary, a direct attack on the nuclear family, which is a direct attack on capitalism. That's why it's happening. There is no other reason. That is why it's happening. Everything they do is about attacking capitalism. Once you understand this, you will understand the left. And if you do not understand this, then you do not understand the left. The right likes to feed you snacks with an aftertaste of crap. Carlin puts out a full-course meal that truly fills the gaps in your knowledge of the left. Once you see it, guys, you can't unsee it. And the only reason I saw it is I watched a lot of their content. I did my due diligence in a way that most of the influencers on the right refuse to do. And because of that, they call me crazy. But We're going to see who's right on this, and I promise you it's going to be me. Watch for how often the left mentions capitalism. And you'll see really quick. All right, guys. That's all I have. That's enough. I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. So, thank you guys for spending some time with me tonight. I hope I explained it. If you have questions, let me know. And I don't know that beer, Lone Wolf, but I can keep an eye on it. We have a spy stream tomorrow at 4 p.m. Today at 4 p.m. It's 1 a.m. We have a spy stream that we're going to be doing, so I will be sending out information about that in the morning. They use our system structures against us. Yes, they do, Jim. How do you fight that? Well, the first thing you need to do is understand them. If you don't understand them, you aren't going to be able to fight them. So let's just focus on that for right now, okay? If you want strategies, I wrote a book about it, Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. It literally has checklists. Ted Cruz fucking plagiarized it. True story. But if you want the real book, the original Unwoke book with the checklists, link is in the description below. It's on Amazon. You can get a hardcover, Kindle version, audio version read by me. It is what it is. All right, guys, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.